This is the Canisius Pedagogy Primer Podcast. I'm Mark Gallimore, Director for the Center for Online Learning and Innovation at Canisius College in Buffalo, New York. This podcast is a multi-episode introduction to teaching in higher education. Today's episode focuses on practical course design that helps your students learn. As usual, you can find the relevant links and other resources in show notes. And for other helpful tips and resources for teaching and learning, go to www.canisius.edu/COLI. The other day I was perusing some old syllabi from courses I took as an undergraduate student, and I remembered how in some courses there wasn't a lot of structure. From one week to the next, we learned what we would learn when we learned it, and perhaps a week in advance. We received course materials and instructions, always paper handouts in those days, presumably before or at least when we needed them. I suspect that in some cases my professors, often graduate students, were new to teaching and learning teaching as they taught. Others were more experienced, but had come of age in an era where the syllabi were basically single-page summaries of course substance and little else. In either case, the students simply had to wait and see what their courses would require of them each week. And hey, I got a good education, many of us did, and I could understand how some professors might think too much focus on course design is stifling. If students pay attention to what I announce in class, everything will be okay. As to what we learn and how much we cover in the class, well, we'll see how it goes. If I need to slow down the course or deal with the unexpected, that's easier to do if I haven't promised any sort of detailed schedule. But I watched as many of my classmates struggled. The retention rate at my big state university wasn't high, and I doubt many schools then felt as much pressure to help students succeed as we do now. We didn't all come from secondary schools that taught us time management or personal organization, and even if we did, it could be difficult to know what each of our courses might serve to us each week or in the next month. Plus, it was sometimes difficult to know what parts of a course were important and which activities, books, or instructions, frankly, weren't. So we can do better. And one way is by intentionally designing our courses to serve definable course goals and objectives and be easier to navigate and anticipate. When you are more deliberate about course design before you begin to teach the course, you make life easier for students and increase their chances of success. Or you lower their stress levels and keep them focused on course content by making procedures easy and predictable. I mentioned some aspects of course design in previous episodes, focused on messaging and syllabi, but in this episode we'll look at some basic course design practices that can help you organize your course and help you be intentional about what is in your course, when, why, and how. Now, if you're teaching a course on relatively short notice, some of what I say here may be impractical to have done by the first day of class. Still, you can sometimes retrofit an ongoing class with better organization and can prepare to teach the class again in the future. And even if your course outline isn't fully detailed by the first day, the more you have to show students, the better. And as Professor Curtis Bonk likes to say, baby steps. Don't stress yourself out over what you think is wrong with your teaching or try to totally rebuild a course from scratch in a few weeks. Instead, each time you teach, select a few key improvements or experiments and build them in. Better teaching is an iterative process that involves select changes over time and some trial and error. In a moment, I'm about to tell you how course design is actually a profession or discipline of its own, which includes research, a body of theory, and practitioners, often called instructional or learning designers. Your school may or may not have an instructional designer on staff. Here at Canisius, the Center for Online Learning and Innovation can assist professors with instructional design. And there's scholarship on teaching and learning with its own journals and conferences. You can benefit from this scholarship by occasionally reading books and articles on good teaching. If you aren't sure where to get started with these, ask your faculty development officer on campus for some recommendations. Okay, but right now I can offer you a very basic piece of advice that everyone probably does in some way or another. Think of your course content as a series of lessons, modules, or subdivisions. These may correspond closely with calendar dates, one lesson or module per week, for example. But they can also be portions or units of learning that serve distinct learning objectives. Many college courses, especially those taught for the first time by a new professor, are designed using the textbook assigned to students. It's no accident, for example, that U.S. History Survey textbooks are roughly 15 or 16 chapters. Textbook companies often supply instructors with lesson packages that include presentation slides or sample problems for class lecture, discussion questions, essay prompts, quiz or test banks, and so on. These days, textbooks might also identify a set of course goals, each with its own subordinate list of learning objectives corresponding to lessons or weeks of the course. If you must teach on short notice, these publisher packages can get you started. But if you're listening to this podcast, though, I have a hunch that you'd like to go beyond having the textbook publisher do the teaching. You want to craft your own courses instead. So we'll start by considering some basic instructional design models that can help us organize our thoughts. Then, I'll provide some practical tips for designing courses that help students manage the workload and focus on learning. Instructional design is a profession, and lots of education outside of schools, broadly speaking, is built by instructional designers. For example, employee training in business, government, healthcare, and education. In many colleges and universities, instructional designers build courses or work with faculty to help professors build courses. Let's take a look at a few instructional design models that can help you organize your courses. One instructional design model is called ADDIE. It's an acronym, ADDIE, that describes a workflow for developing courses: analysis, design, development, implementation, evaluation. In the analysis phase, decide the basic things you plan to teach and how they break down into a bigger list of objectives that can be met in your course. In the design phase, sketch in a rough course outline. What are the objectives for each subdivision, lesson, or week in the course? What kinds of activities or lessons would you like to employ, and why? In the development stage, you build out the logistics of the course: due dates, activity dates, dates and times when certain resources must be available to students to support later things. Write your course policies, assignments, quizzes, exams, detailed instructions, and rubrics. Then you implement, teach the course, and carry out your plans. Modify where necessary. Monitor how things are going with a log or journal of some sort. In the last phase, evaluation, you reflect on what worked, what didn't, and what to do next time. Here, student feedback can be a big help. Another popular model is backward design. Similar to ADDIE, you define course goals. But then, perhaps as you develop your objectives, you develop the assessments right away, exams, papers, assignments, and so on, that you plan to deploy in the course. This takes place before you decide how you will actually teach the content. Because you have the learning goals, objectives, and assessments in front of you, you should be able to develop lessons, activities, or exercises that teach to your major purposes and methods of measuring learning. Some folks may frown at this. That's teaching to the test, an infamous criticism of educators. But if you are the one developing the test, and you are the teacher, not some distant bureaucrat, what's the problem? Neither ADDIE nor backward design are specific checklists or step-by-step instructions for developing every course, but they are helpful frameworks that can organize your thoughts as you tackle your own course design work. In both cases, learning goals and objectives are the spine of the course. You may get these from your department or program, or you may develop some or all of them yourselves. Here at Canisius, departments, programs, and schools typically have learning goals across courses and often for particular courses. Plus, the core curriculum supplies its participant courses with a set of learning goals as well. But you may be left with defining objectives that serve those goals. Important here is that once you have a set of goals and objectives, and you begin the process of building a course around them, you will probably make sacrifices. You may have an activity you'd love to get into your course, but if it really doesn't serve the course goals and objectives, you probably need to leave it out. Your students' time and attention is limited, and so is yours. So try to avoid having assessments that, as neat as they may be, don't serve the course purposes. And avoid having activities, readings, or other course content that don't connect to assessments. Another tip for course design is this: how routine can you make your course? That is, how repetitive or predictable can you make each week and perhaps 2-week lessons activities? Generally speaking, the more you can, the better it is. College students benefit from routine. Student support officers often tell college students that. Organize your life into a routine to ensure you get things done and don't get surprised. Depending on what you're teaching, you may or may not be able to build routine into your class. If you can, do it. Can you make activities repetitive? Obviously not in substance, but in procedure, type, format. Probably if you are having them read a textbook chapter each week or do a mathematics exercise or a set of problems between every class. To an extent possible, can you have most work outside of class be roughly equal in terms of effort required? Maybe not every time or every week, but if students can anticipate the same kinds of activities and the same level of effort on most weeks, that's a big help. If your students are doing the same kinds of things each week, you probably have weekly deadlines to match. Even if students miss Wednesday's class, they probably know that the weekly homework is due in the online Dropbox on Thursday night at 6, since on every previous week, the homework was due on Thursday night at 6. Obviously, content varies week to week, and having special projects, evolving, or even iterative coursework is possible. The above advice doesn't mean you can't have one or two big projects due at certain times during the semester or a one-off assignment that best fits a particular lesson or concept. These are deviations from routine, and when a big project is due, you probably want to suspend regular assignments that are typically due that day or week. Plus, every course must deal with contingencies, snow days, the instructor becoming ill, or even pre-planned days when you need to cancel class, such as a professional or life event. But to the extent that you can provide routine in your class and properly communicate exceptions, your students will do just fine handling the occasional deviation. Let's look at two examples that are built around fairly strong routines. First, let's say I'm teaching a face-to-face course. I find I can organize the course content into 2-week lessons or modules. So on Monday and Wednesday, class is organized around lecture with perhaps a short activity such as a short review writing or think, pair, share activity. Students are expected to read several articles and perhaps a textbook chapter on their own early in this week. On Thursday, there's a short reading quiz available all day online, and it's due at 8 p.m. Thursday night. In Friday's class, there's perhaps a class discussion or perhaps a recitation group meeting. There's a short reflection writing assignment due every second Wednesday, and the second Friday is again discussion day, perhaps following up on the first Friday's discussion with some new material read or picked up in lecture earlier in the second week. This course has 3 exams, which replace a first Monday's lecture in 2 modules, and then the third exam is during finals week. In the syllabus, students see the structure for this laid out in a grid. Within the LMS, students see all the weekly readings, the online quiz, and writing assignment Dropbox listed in a lesson module, and perhaps briefly described in an introductory web page for and within each module. Deadlines are listed in all places, but after about week 3, students know when things are due each week anyway. In the online gradebook, I might list all the quizzes and writing assignments separately, or I might pair them up by lesson instead. Within this framework, I can still introduce a little variety. Perhaps the lowest scores on 2 of the weekly writing assignments are dropped. That means students could skip 1 or even 2 and still get an A in the course, and might even plan to do so during weeks when things get busy in other courses. Or I can offer students the option to create an infographic on the same topic in lieu of the writing assignment. Let's look at another hypothetical course organization. Let's say I'm teaching an online class this time. Each Monday, the weekly module opens up to students at 8 a.m. This includes instructions on textbook readings and perhaps some other articles linked, or better yet, citations, leaving students to find the articles in the library databases themselves. Good skills to practice. By Tuesday at 5 p.m., students must write and post an initial post that each starts a thread within a weekly asynchronous discussion or online message board. These are in response to a prompt question concerning the readings. By Thursday at 5 p.m., students complete an online quiz. On Friday at 5 p.m., students post a reply to 2 other students within the weekly message board. Throughout the semester, there are 3 big assignments, each due after a week's time. Again, students see all this laid out clearly in a routine, this time perhaps a separate web page instead of tacked onto the syllabus. Plus, they get a weekly email about the time the weekly module opens that reminds them of what they have to do during the week, as well as the looming deadline for the upcoming major project. I might also include some learning objectives for the week that hint at what they should be getting out of the readings and activities. And again, how about some variety within this structure? So instead of just posting in the discussion with text, students have the option to record webcam or screencast video messages, or just audio clips instead. That weekly quiz might be one option, paired with a short reflection essay as another option. And the major projects could offer students a chance to write a traditional paper, or record a 7 to 10 minute explainer video, or perhaps build an online interactive mini website using something like Google Sites. If you already have a course built around learning objectives and that has a good routine, but want to take course planning to another level, consider this. See if you can structure your class to complement other classes they take on campus. This could mean modifying your routine to make life easier for students. For example, you could schedule the due dates for big exams and projects that take place before or after times when students typically face big deadlines or exams. If you know that your students face their midterm exams all in a single week, or usually have big projects to hand in on the last week of classes, consider avoiding any homework assignments those weeks. Halloween is a popular holiday that colleges and universities seemingly don't respect, but lots of people celebrate. If you have a face-to-face class that day, why not have some self-paced online lesson for that day or week instead? In another podcast, we discussed communicating with students and said that you should choose a few forms of communication and then stick to them. You might consider having a routine reminder or update message, for example, every week, as I suggested in the second course organization example. Some professors record webcam videos and install them in their LMS course space. These appear every week at the same time and cover what students must do in the next few days, with perhaps some reminders for distant deadlines. Other professors simply compose a weekly email that has the same headings and sections within it. That's great. It's easy for you to do and simple for your students to understand and anticipate. This is a crucial part of any online course, but it's even helpful for face-to-face classes. This routinizing of your course can help you too. It makes explaining the course and your expectations easier. Once you commit to a class format and choose the kinds of activities you'll do, you narrow your lesson planning to that specific set of activities. This helps you resist the temptation to do too many different kinds of things in a single semester. Plus, if you have a routine way of communicating with students, you'll be reminded to remind them and won't be wondering, gosh, did I tell them that such and such would be on the upcoming exam? Did I remember to mention to them that we're skipping chapter 6? You can compose these messages days before you send or post them, and you can even revisit last year's or last semester's messages to remind you how you taught the class previously. If you must modify something mid-semester, you can better plan since it's easier to see how that modification will affect later course elements and student workload. Having a consistent course format with easily identifiable and even predictable activities and deadlines benefits all students. Hardworking students will appreciate having a good idea of what's coming up in later weeks. When your course has a predictable routine, it encourages them to set aside time each day or week to properly complete course exercises and assignments and prepare for class activities. And less committed students can hardly complain that your course was confusing or unpredictable. Moreover, at a Jesuit college committed to providing opportunities to a diverse student body, it's crucial. Students with full-time jobs, small children, or other life circumstances that complicate their lives appreciate being able to build your course into their busy schedule as early as possible. It's also a big help for students who previously had little guidance or opportunity to develop personal organizational practices. Once you've designed your course in a clear, objective-driven, and routine structure, you can more or less describe that to students in your syllabus at the beginning of a semester. Even in a course you're building and teaching right now or very soon, where you can't precisely anticipate what each lesson will yet look like, you can still give students some general guidelines as to what they can expect. Most courses these days have in them an outline that adds a page or two to the syllabus. These are great, and if students can be convinced to read the syllabus, they fit nicely with course policies and general descriptions. You can even strengthen the outline by adding a paragraph description of the course similar to what I just did above with the 2 example courses. But if you're using a learning management system on the web anyway, you can also simply build the structure of the course within folders or modules, accompanying each item of content such as activity descriptions, assignment instructions, or folder headings. You can include deadlines or other relevant dates, and even some instructions or descriptions. In short, you could have the same outline you otherwise add to your syllabus appear as the structure of the course content in the LMS, properly signposted. You may inadvertently do this anyway, so it's not much more work to just add deadlines or other descriptive information. To be clear, this can be done even if you cannot or would rather not make all course content available to your students at the beginning of the semester. Even if the content is only listed by title and are not yet clickable links that go to actual instructions, activities, or assignments, students can still get a great idea of what's involved in completing the course and what to expect in the class week to week. Even if only a few weeks of content are available, students can anticipate that the rest of the course might look like that, especially if you tell them so. I also like to add an instruction page for each lesson, week, or module, too. This briefly tells students what they must do to complete that unit, including simple text information that otherwise would need to be added to a separate document. This can include vocabulary terms, textbook page numbers, or instructions that a reading or film is on reserve at the library, and so on. In my weekly modules, it's the very first item or link students see, and I just use the LMS's own web page tool to create it. Nothing fancy. If you want to get fancy, you can record a short screencast or webcam video for your students each week with the same information. Thank you for listening to the Canisius Pedagogy Primer podcast. Once again, all relevant links can be found in show notes. For more resources, check out canisius.edu/Kali or find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube.